Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting. At this point, let's just give them what they want. Edition. Today is episode 199. Orca boat attacks are just a fun fad among juveniles, and this plant shoots its seeds with ballistic force. My friends, if you're a longtime member of the flock, an animal lover, or even a pet owner, then you know the more we look at the creatures around us, we see a little bit of ourselves in them more and more every day. The common lab rat, for example, who we found out back in episode 177, they have an imagination. They think about places and objects that aren't right in front of them. Thanks to some nifty, very tiny VR equipment, we know that they have the ability to imagine walking through a location or moving an object to a specific spot. Yeah, they can visualize redecorating. In that same episode, we also learned that completely unrelated groups of apes can join forces and cooperate, not only sharing food, but assisting each other by scaring away snakes or completely destroying a common enemy. I feel that. Then way the fuck back in In-Betweeny 105, we witnessed the wild invasive pigs of Canada adapting to the cold by actually building structures to protect themselves from the elements. Structures researchers have adorably called pigloos. Yeah. Yep. And finally, the title of episode 186 said it all. When Taurus stopped feeding macaques, they started using stone tools, and older sister bees teach younger bees how to dance. There are literally hours and hours in the show's back catalog dedicated to these kinds of examples. And today, especially in the first half of the show, we're going to tack on a few more minutes as we cover a topic that's been viral ever since the first incident appeared 4 years ago. I'm talking about orcas, air quotes, attacking sailboats, catamarans, and a handful of fishing boats and motorboats. Specifically, a group of critically endangered orcas who call Europe's Iberian Peninsula home. It's estimated only 40 members of the clan remain. Between this fact and videos of extremely pricey ships of leisure being towed to harbor or sinking completely, humans around the world couldn't help but think, this is revenge. These orcas were adopted as animal welfare judges dispensing justice to class warfare heroes sinking the rich. Well, after 4 years of researchers studying this behavior, I've got really good news. Just this past May, a report was released by the International Whaling Commission, and the theory they came up with as to why, since 2020, there have been nearly 700 reported orca boat interactions is better than I could have imagined. No. I will not give it away here in the intro, but I can tell you, it's not revenge. Don't be sad. I can see your face. When you hear the possible explanation, you will laugh and sigh and find yourself saying, it's kind of like looking in a mirror. Then after the break, ballistatory. No, I didn't sneeze or have an aneurysm. It's actually a thing. It's a form of seed dispersal seen in plants. Along with gravity, wind, water, and movement by animals, i.e. spit or pooped out, plants can also ensure seed distribution with tiny explosions of sorts. I mean, why wait to have your fruit be eaten when it can act like a grenade? Yeah. Some plants have evolved to take matters into their own hands. Or rather, their own leaves or branches. Whatever, you know what I mean. They use hygroscopic tension within the fruit to go boom. And basically that's just a fancy way of saying when lots and lots and lots of moisture is absorbed, the excessive pressure against the cell walls of the fruit causes it to break or pop with really impressive force. One famous example of this is the sandbox tree, native to tropical regions of North and South America, including the Amazon. This tree is fucking massive. It can grow up to 60 meters or 200 feet, and its leaves grow to 60 centimeters or 2 feet wide. Now that's big. That's fucking big. But what it's known for is the sound of its exploding fruit. The explosions are powerful enough to throw seeds up to 100 meters or 330 feet, which is nearly the length of an entire American football field. And the sound is so distinct, it's been nicknamed the dynamite tree. And if you think that's something, prepare yourself. A serendipitous discovery just revealed there's a new plant in town that just told the dynamite tree to hold its ammo. My friends, it'll be my honor to introduce the Chinese witch hazel, a plant less than half the size of the sandbox tree, but it hurls its seeds with such force. If a human experienced the kind of G's its seeds experiences, that person would die. I'm not exaggerating. And by the way, this plant doesn't use hygroscopic tension. No, we will get into the study that made this wild discovery, and we will get into how this plant goes ballistic. In the meantime, I'm Jill Chacha, and if this is your first time listening, welcome to the flock, my bursting business goose. To begin, we're going to need some waterproof sunscreen, a pitcher of sangria, beach chairs, and impressive binoculars because we're heading on over to a section of the Iberian Peninsula. And for my fellow geographically challenged Americans who may be wondering where that might be exactly, don't worry, I've got you. Please imagine Spain. Perfect. Now point to the southwest corner. Fantastic. The coastline here curves like a backward C, and I'd like you to trace it from the top to the bottom. Fabulous. Okay, now what you're going to pass is the rest of the Spanish southern coastline, the famous Rock of Gibraltar, part of the British territory known as Gibraltar. Then you're going to pass a tiny body of water called the Strait of, you guessed it, Gibraltar. But then you're going to land in a completely different continent. You're now in Africa, specifically Morocco. And that's the end of our backward sea. But if you move your finger up, that's the North Atlantic Ocean. And if you keep moving, voila, we are back in Spain. To its left is Portugal, by the way, which is also part of the Iberian Peninsula. The waters here are grossly turquoise and extremely tempting, but do hold off for now. Pour yourself a drink and bust out those binoculars because we're about to witness two of the more dramatic orca boat interactions over the past 4 years. My friends, zoom in. It's spring, May of 2023, and the Swiss sailing yacht Champagne has just left the docks of southwest Spain, sailing into the glorious sun of the Atlantic. The ship didn't travel very far. Details are scarce, but what was reported by the local media and beyond is enough to tell one hell of a tale. For 90 minutes, 2 juvenile killer whales repeatedly poked and prodded the rudder, while an adult seemed to be more interested with the rest of the boat. Crew members told the German magazine Yacht that it, quote, repeatedly rammed the vessel, and once you hear that orcas can grow up to 23 to 27 feet in length and weigh up to 13,000 pounds, it's no shock that even the gentlest of nudges of an animal this size makes an impact. No pun intended. After an hour and a half, the ship was rendered useless, and the crew called for assistance. Unharmed, they boarded the Coast Guard ship, which also towed the battered Champagne to shore. Well, it tried to anyway. The yacht eventually submerged in the process. Now, my tanned business goose, zoom out. We're back in 2024, but once again, it's May. And once again, we're looking at a sailing yacht named after a fancy liquid, a 50-foot vessel called the Albaran Cognac. At the helm are 2 customers who plan to rent the ship for the day, and they headed out early, very optimistic, sailing into the Atlantic as close as 14 miles north of Cape Spartel in northern Morocco. All was going well. Until about 9 a.m., when, quote, passengers aboard the 50-foot Alberon Cognac felt blows to the yacht's hull and saw that the rudder had been damaged. As water began leaking onto the ship, they contacted the Maritime Rescue Coordination Center in Tarifa, Spain, which directed them to prepare for an emergency rescue. About an hour later, a nearby oil tanker picked up the two unharmed crew members. The boat took on more water and sank soon after. It's not clear how many orcas targeted the vessel. End quote, from Sarah Cutta of Smithsonian Magazine. Well, my keen business goose, that was a sight to behold. But you probably noticed a pattern, or maybe a few patterns. Like both of these incidents took place in May, and the rudder was involved. If so, you are exactly right. In fact, since 2020, many of the 671 other officially documented interactions also noted the rudder was a popular choice for some of the orcas who call the Iberian Peninsula home. Let's meet them, shall we? Fun fact number 1. They are genetically distinct from other orca populations in the Northeast Atlantic. Fun fact number 2. These orcas follow the seasonal migration of Atlantic bluefin tuna, which is their primary food source. Put a delicious pin in this. The orcas gather in early spring in the Strait of Gibraltar, and through the summer they remain, before traveling north along the coast of Portugal. In the fall, they depart, heading to deeper waters in the fall. I said that twice. Whoops. Not so fun fact number 3. Since 2011, the total number of this subpopulation has remained at 40 or so. Thankfully, there hasn't been a significant dip, but there's been no growth either. As such, they are listed as endangered by the Spanish National Catalog of Endangered Species and critically endangered by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Fun fact number 4. Thanks to videos, photos, and witness accounts, researchers over the past 4 years believe 15 Iberian orcas belonging to 2 distinct pods are behind all of these boat shenanigans. Yes, 15 orcas. And we know who they are. They even have names. The 15 as a whole are known as the Gladises because, get this, the name Gladys is a reference to the old scientific name for orcas, Orcinus gladiator, which means whale fighter in Latin. That is badass, full stop, but guess what? When we look even closer at some of the members of the 2 pods, things get even more interesting. My friends, from Pod 1, may I introduce you to the matriarch and adult, White Gladys. With her are her offspring, Gladys Filabres, born in 2021, and her sisters, Gladys Delilah and Gladys Clara. From the second residential pod, we have 3 other juveniles, Gray Gladys, and their siblings, Gladys Pique and Gladys Negra. White Gladys is well over 20 feet in length, and the juveniles clock in between 9 and 14 feet long. My friends, these are the all-stars of the Gladyses, having been in contact with more marine vessels than any other. So, why? Why any of them? And why just these Iberian orcas? That question has been on the lips of the Spanish and Portuguese governments since 2020, when they contacted a tiny but mighty team to survey all the footage, all the facts, and to make their own investigations. A team that included Alex Zerbini, a senior researcher scientist at the University of Washington and a chairman of the scientific committee at the International Whaling Commission, a global body focused on whale conservation, and he must get plenty of sleep at night. Naomi Rose, a senior scientist and marine mammal expert at the Animal Welfare Institute, and all of the beautiful souls who work at a group called Conservation, Information, and Research on citations, also called Circe for short. Altogether, they formed a more powerful and nerdier alliance than any fucking Marvel movie to date, and they just dropped their findings. My friends, it's time. Please, drop your own rudder, or whatever it is that has your attention, and pick up your phone. Head on over to the tube of you, and please search Circe, C-I-R-C-E, and the question, how do orcas, in quotes, attack the rudder? Again, that's Circe, and the question, how do orcas attack the rudder? What will pop up is a mere 1 minute and 23 seconds of amazing footage captured by the Conservation Information and Research Citations Group. Now, please, pause this and give that a go. I'll also have screenshots of the video on our social media stuffs, but I swear it doesn't do it justice. You need to get the vibes these orcas are laying down. Okay, go ahead. I'll be here when you get back. Okay, what did you think? Don't tell me. I can see your face. You're thinking, okay, I watched the whole thing, and it's not aggression at all. They come up to the boats, swim around them, and the orcas are just kind of chilling there, and every now and then, they bump the rudder. Are they, curious or playing? Well, if you thought that, you're right. That's exactly what the team has decided what's going on here. But stick with me. It's not that easy. Let's get into it. My friends, after 4 years of clickety-clack calculations and evidence like the video you just saw was reviewed. Drum roll, please. Thank you in the back. From the International Whaling Commission's study titled Workshop Report Interactions Between Iberian Killer Whales and Vessels, Management Recommendations, quote, the singular agreement among the experts at this workshop is that the interactions between Iberian killer whales and vessels are not aggressive. The interactions have more elements consistent with fad behavior or play, socializing, than aggression. The use of such terms as attack to describe these interactions is thus inappropriate, misleading, and should cease. End quote. There's nothing in the behavior of these animals that suggests they're being aggressive, said the Zerbini to the Washington Post. As they play with the rudder, they don't understand that they can damage the rudder and that damaging the rudder will affect human beings. It's more playful than intentional. End quote. Naomi followed up by saying, quote, it's a very dangerous game they're playing, obviously. But it's a game. End quote. Well, my equally curious business goose, I can still see your face. You're thinking, if this is a game, what in the holy hell started it? And how could something like using your face against a boat become a trending fad? Great questions. I've got 3 words for you. Tide Pod Challenge. No, wait, I got 2 more. Cinnamon Challenge. Oh, I got 13 more. Filling your mouth with water and hitting your friend's face with a tortilla. Yes, just like humans, orcas are highly social, and boy howdy, what might seem at the surface as absolutely fucking ridiculous is actually their way of having fun and feeling included. Ramming boats is trending, and it's trending in a very similar way to previous orca fads, which includes orcas wearing dead salmon as hats. Yes, because that happened back in the fashionable 1980s of all times. The trend started when a female orca, put a pin in that, began balancing dead salmon on her head. Weeks later, the behavior spread to 2 other pods in the same community. Orcas also started doing this thing where they toss baby porpoises around. Porpoises are dolphin-like in appearance, but they're closely related to narwhals and belugas than to actual dolphins. And throwing them around is totally the thing to do. Everyone's doing it. To our eyes, it may be fucking horrific, but for orcas, it's a schoolyard game. They've been harassing and throwing porpoises in the Salish Sea for 60 years, often to the point of killing them, but they never eat them. So, who started the latest trend? It's hard to pinpoint exactly, but there are two theories. The first one points the finger right at these meddling kids. Quote, "When it comes to the rudder bumping," Naomi Rose told the Washington Post, "most of the whales involved are male, juvenile, or teens, meaning they're between the ages of 5 and 18. Fully grown males over the age of 25 are not participating in the antics. And while some female whales have been spotted at the scene of the incidents, they just seem to be sort of keeping an eye on their kids, who are actually doing the playing." End quote. Yeah, let that sink in for a minute. Just when you think this can't possibly get any more like us, Mom is out there keeping a tired eye on her annoying children, making sure they don't do anything too stupid. Remember that second pod of All-Star pod? Sorry, delete. Remember that second pod of All-Star Gladyses I told you about? The one with the 3 juveniles? Gray Gladys, Gladys Pique, and Gladys Negra? Well, their mother, Gladys Herbilly, is occasionally observed, their mother, I should say, is occasionally observed in the distance during their boat games, watching over them. But she herself does not participate. And the babysitting doesn't stop with them. Remember White Gladys? Well, her mother, Gladys Lamare, is also out there looking over her adult daughter, but she too never approaches the vessels. Speaking of White Gladys, she, from what I can find, is the only adult exhibiting this behavior, which leads us to theory number 2. For this one, though, I'm going to let an expert drop this bomb on you. My friends, the brilliant marine biologist Monica Gonzalez spoke with John Farrell of the Washington Post in an interview, and I'm going to play a part of that video right the fuck now. So, here we go. Theory number 2.
That's Monica Gonzalez. She's a marine biologist of the Atlantic Orca Working Group, the same group who has been monitoring these orca attacks off the Iberian Peninsula.
And started touching the rudder. They love the rudder. We don't know why. Always touch the rudder. They never bite the rudder, just move with the nose and the head. And it's very usually that the rudder breaks because it's a very big animal.
And researchers are still trying to understand why this is happening.
White Gladys, she is very famous in the news because one hypothesis is that these orcas suffer an adversive moment, a stressful moment, and she only wanted to stop the boats, trying to avoid this traumatic experience.
Orcas are very matriarchal within their pods. In the group of 15 that has been attacking, there are 13 juveniles that look up to White Gladys.
So the juveniles could think that if this important mother is doing this, I should do the same, trying to survive.
Okay, there you have it, my friends, my therapeutic business goose. It's possible. White Gladys's previous trauma with boats developed into a defensive posture to protect her offspring. And kids being kids, they picked up this behavior and ran with it, or swam with it, making it their own. And if you're wondering, God, don't kids have anything better to do nowadays? Well, once again, like humans, no. These orcas are currently experiencing the youthful bliss of having extra time on their fins. It's time to unpin that pin we pinned way the fuck back earlier in the episode, the one about the Atlantic bluefin tuna. The team behind the new report also mentions that Iberian orcas playing with boats could be linked to a rise in numbers of their main food source. Bluefin tuna were decimated by human overfishing, with numbers plummeting to critical levels in the 1990s and early 2000s. But populations in the eastern Atlantic Ocean and Mediterranean Sea have bounced back, thanks to regulations. The recovery of bluefin tuna could mean orcas, quote, have all this leisure time on their hands because they don't have to eat every fish they find, end quote. Naomi Rose told livescience.com. And you know what they say about idle fins. So, is this a learned fad among juveniles and punk-ass kids with extra time on their hands? Maybe. And their mothers just stand around with their hands on their hips and watching? Maybe, and I love it. If you still have your fingers crossed, though, that revenge is somehow involved, I know it sounds oh so delicious, but it's not a behavior that's seen in any populations of orcas ever. Even during some of the most traumatic events in their recent history. In an interview with Scientific American, quote, Deborah Giles, a science and research director of the Washington state-based nonprofit conservation organization called Wild Orca, Deborah pointed out that humans relentlessly harassed killer whales off the coast of Washington and Oregon in the 1960s and 70s, capturing young orcas and taking them away for display at marine parks. These are animals that every single one of them had been captured at one point or another. Most whales multiple times, she said. And these are whales that saw their babies being taken away from them and put on trucks and driven away, never to be seen again. And yet, these whales never attacked boats, never attacked humans. End quote. So, my friends, if an Iberian orca face plants into your vessel, don't take it personal. In fact, take it as a compliment. You are part of a brand new orca trend. After the break, we are leaving the sea for land, and we are swapping the power of a several-ton orca for the power of a shrub. But don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. Its appearance is deceiving as fuck. You'll want to duck and cover. Stay tuned.
Hello everyone, Stakuyi here.
And I'm Gabby.
And we are the hosts of History of Everything, a podcast which you can probably guess by the name is, well, it's about everything. Do you want to know why people thought potatoes were evil and would give you syphilis? Are you curious about all the stories of the terrible and stupid ways that people have kicked the bucket over the years? Do you want to hear tales about all of the different badasses of history and the lives that they had brought to life? Well, if so, then look no further. History of Everything is just the right podcast for you. It's available on Spotify, Pandora, and anywhere else that you get your podcast from. Join us for some fun and just see how weird and wacky history can be.
So this is History Uncovered, and I'm Kalina.
And I'm Austin. We are the co-hosts of the show.
History Uncovered is a podcast presented by All That's Interesting, where we both are writers. We cover all sorts of topics: true crime, unsolved mysteries, history, folklore, the paranormal, you name it.
We've been doing this now for more than 100 episodes, covering a wide range of topics, and probably something that's bound to be interesting for everyone out there.
Absolutely. And in addition to our normal episodes, we also do a history happy hour about the recent news in the world of history and archaeology, which we cover daily on the site, as well as important historical anniversaries.
We also have done some special series. We've done one on the Titanic, doing one on Jack the Ripper, done one about some famous UFO sightings. So if all of that sounds like something that might be interesting to you, and you like having a good time, learning new things, and maybe laughing or just groaning at some bad puns, check out History Uncovered everywhere you get your podcasts.
And we're back. We are so back. And my friends, we've just jumped a fence surrounding a most enchanting garden. And judging by the way you landed on your feet, I can tell this isn't the first time trespassing. Good for you. For my innocent business geese, this is an imaginary scenario, so breathe a sigh of relief and inhale. We are lung deep in sunflowers, marigolds, lavender, peony, dahlias, and a bunch of other plants and flowers that come up when you Google recommend plants and flowers for a garden. There is a lot. Among the avalanche of color, however, is one plant that goes by the name Chinese witch hazel. And to be honest, if I didn't point it out to you, there's a good chance you'd walk right by it, especially if this scenario is happening in your head sometime between April and December. If so, what we're looking at is a shrub whose long, thin tendril-like branches grow from one spot in the ground out like a hand. Its leaves are green, flat, and open like a palm. right now. The most remarkable thing about it is its height, averaging about 15 feet tall. If this scenario, though, is happening between January and March, well, hot damn, we've got a totally different thing going on here. These leaves have been replaced by bright yellow flowers, but not just any flower. Their shape reminds me of fireworks, specifically those big golden fountain fireworks. My friends, head on over to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post. Whatever you're looking at right now isn't as interesting as this. Trust me, I'll give you a sec. I know it's fancy as fuck, right? My elegant business goose. Before us are these flowers, just dozens and dozens of them. And if you stick your face a little closer to one, you'll see its fruit smack in the middle. Another fun thing about these plants is that they fruit and flower at the same time, which is fun, and put a pin in that. Not so fun, though, is that this fruit is not something you're going to want to eat. In fact, it's not meant to be eaten by any human or animal. This plant has no need for that. For you see, the fruit looks like a brown paper sack from the outside, but on the inside is a seed. That, when the time is right, well, you're going to want to get out of the way. Let's get into it. Like the name suggests, the plant is native to Western China. But if you have moist, acidic, well-drained soil, full sun to partial shade, well, it'll be happy there too. The Botanic Garden Freiburg is one of those places, as is an office in the Plant Biomechanics Department of the University of Freiburg in Germany. Now, being that this plant can reach heights as tall as 20 goddamn feet, if you're in a small space like an office, a few small branches will do, especially when they're covered in these bright, flamboyant yellow flowers. A little goes a long way as decor. That's exactly what the extremely appropriately named Simon Papinga, a researcher studying plant biomechanics at the University of Freiburg in Germany, had sitting by his desk. A pot with some flowering Chinese witch hazel to brighten up the place. What happened next was a bit of a surprise. Quote, "By coincidence, we had a twig of this plant in an office, and it started shooting the seeds," the pop told Kenneth Chang of the New York Times. "You hear the crack, and then it shoots out," added Thomas Speck, a botany professor at Freiburg. The pop then followed up by saying, quote, "This triggered our interest in it. So we started investigating, and it became more interesting, and even more interesting, and even more interesting," end quote. Well, shit. When I hear a quote like that, you know I have to cover whatever was discovered, especially if it's about a plant that throws its seeds around with such force, it gains the attention of seasoned botanists. Let the innuendos begin. My friends, if you recall, during the intro, we mentioned ballistochory, a form of seed dispersal characterized by forceful ejection caused by hygroscopic tension. It's a fancy way of saying that when lots and lots of moisture is absorbed, the excessive pressure against the cell wall of the fruit causes it to break or explode, with the seed going airborne. That is what the pop and the speck were expecting when they harvested 6 of those funny-looking sacks from a Chinese witch hazel plant grown at the Botanic Garden Freiburg. During transit, they were stored together with a moist paper towel in glass jars, and when the time was right, they were each fixed to a board with putty and air-dried at an ambient temperature of approximately 23 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit with approximately 50% humidity. Sign me up. If you'd like to take a peek at what this setup looks like, of course, head on over to our social media stuffs, tap on today's post, and you're going to swipe past all those curious orcas. You're going to see a photo of these 6 fruits, which have opened. And from their mouths, you'll see each 10 millimeter or half-inch seed suspended in air. My zippy business goose, this screenshot belongs to a video taken by the pop and the speck, but you too can watch just how quickly this seed speeds away. Are you fucking ready for this? Yes, I'm going to ask you to please fire up the old tube of view, because you need to see this for yourself, or at least try to. Search, "This plant can fire seeds with ballistic force," and a 18-second video from Science Magazine will show up. Now, do not blink. And I'm telling you this because right when you press play, by the first second, the seed is completely gone and out of view. Go ahead, pause this, and take a look. Okay, I said fast, and that was fast, right? We need to talk about that first second. My friends, the Pop and the Spec did some clickety-clack calculations with their high-speed camera, and you're going to need to hold on when I tell you about these numbers. They had to reduce the camera speed to 30,000 frames per second in order to make tangible observations of the moving seed. That's what the other 17 seconds of the video are. The reduced speed of the film to 30,000 frames per second. This tiny half-inch seed is traveling through the air at an average of 27.5 miles per hour. That's nearly 30 miles per hour, or 44.3 kilometers, which suggests that they could land as far away as 18 meters or 59 feet. That's impressive. But fucking how? Well, that fruit doesn't explode. It just cracks open. And then poof, like a bat out of hell, the seed is gone. Well, my magical business goose, the botany team busted out a combination of MRI scans and microscopes to find out what hidden structures within this plant make it a loaded, sparkly weapon. So, what did they find? Drum roll, please. Thank you again. Quote, "They discovered that the fruits of the plant act as drying squeeze catapults. As the outer part of the fruit, or the exocarp, dries out, it shrinks, whilst the inner part, the endocarp, also changes shape and dehydrates. This puts increasing amount of pressure, of mechanical pressure, on the seed inside until it shoots out." Quote, from the one and only Holly Large of IFL Science. Thank you, Holly. Oh, my friends. This means, 1, the sac basically dries up into a functional catapult. 2, it does not use hydroscopic tension. And 3, the seeds are essentially flicked out with so much energy, they experience 2,000 Gs. I'm not kidding. 2,000 Gs of force. If you and I felt this in our bones, they would shatter into powder. This enormous energy is not only converted into forward motion, but a spiral motion as well. A camera placed in front of the fruits captured the seeds spinning like a bullet does when it exits the barrel of a gun. And just as with every other statistic you've heard, the number of spins will blow you away too. No pun intended. Quote, as it flies, the seed is spinning fast, 12,000 to 25,000 revolutions a minute. It's exceptional to launch it with this spiral, said Dwight Whittaker, a physics professor at Pomona College in California who was not involved with the witch hazel research, but who has studied how a different plant, the hairy flower wild petunia, catapults its seed into the wild. Quote, it's just really cool how they documented how it does that. End quote from the New York Times. Look, if you have a special someone in your life, you need to start calling them my hairy flower wild petunia. You can thank me later. Also cute, seeds from different fruits on the same witch hazel plant can spin in different directions, and we don't know why yet. But I do know this. If you have a Chinese witch hazel plant in your home, please don't aim it at your face. Instead, watch this space. because the same non-invasive MRI techniques the Pop and the Speck used, those could also be applied to study the movements of other plants, such as how the Venus flytrap catches and eats bugs. That's still like a thing we need to figure out exactly. And there's just so much badassery in this episode. So please, share it. And thank you for listening, rating, subscribing, telling your friends that orcas just want to have fun with their face. And, yeah, it's just what they do. Oh, tell them about the salmon hats. Yeah, that was great. And this plant that just shoots its seeds out. Make it as uncomfortable as possible when you tell your friends about this. And a 2,000 G's of thanks to the folks over at Airwave Media, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you love the other podcasts in this family. And please, stay interesting.